The desert sun burned high over the dusty auction grounds. 1,000 voices shouted in heat and hunger. Creatures from all over the galaxy gathered in the open square, looking for bargain slaves, pets, laborers, fighters, breeders. And there she was, a feline girl, small and thin, stood on a rusted metal platform. Chains on her ankles and wrists, her fur matted. Her silver tail curled tight around her legs. Her eyes, golden and bright, were full of fear, but no one cared. "Next," shouted the auctioneer, slapping her file on a rusty control panel. "1 unit, female, feline class, age unknown." Previous owner discarded her, no offspring produced. The crowd laughed. "Too skinny to breed," someone jeered. "Looks broken," another said. Throwing a rotten fruit that hit her side, she didn't react, didn't flinch. Only stared straight ahead like she wasn't there. Her ears were down, tail trembling, lips dry from thirst. The auctioneer tried to start the bidding. 2 credits? Anyone? She eats very little, no maintenance, obedient and silent. Silence, fine, 1 credit. The auctioneer shouted, voice cracking with anger. Still no hands went up. "She's been rejected from 3 colonies," a fat, lizard-like buyer said. "Nobody wants a defective breeder, half a credit." The auctioneer cried in desperation, "Someone take her." No one moved. In the crowd, a human man watched quietly. Standing in the shade of a broken pillar, he looked out of place plain clothes. Dusty boots and tired eyes. He said nothing. Just stared at the feline girl with a strange look in his eyes. The auctioneer grew annoyed. "If no one bids, I'll send her to the pits, good for dog food at least." At that, the feline girl's eyes twitched slightly. Her lip quivered. She whispered something no one heard. A word lost in the wind. The auctioneer turned to grab her chain and pull her down, and then, "I'll take her," the human said. His voice quiet but firm. The crowd froze, heads turned. Whispers spread like fire. Did he just say, "Human wants her"? The auctioneer laughed nervously. "Sir, you sure? She's not exactly prime stock." The man stepped forward, handing over 3 credits, more than anyone expected. He didn't touch the chain, didn't shove her, didn't even speak again. He simply looked at her and nodded once. The auctioneer shrugged, took the credits, and marked the sale complete. "She's all yours." Human, the chain was unhooked from the platform, but still wrapped around her wrists. She looked up slowly, her voice shaking. "Why?" He didn't answer, only turned and walked toward his ship. Expecting her to follow, for a second, she didn't move, confused. Afraid this was another trick, another cruel joke. Then something inside her pushed her legs forward 1 step. Then another. The heat of the ground burned her feet. But she followed. The crowd watched in silence as the broken feline girl walked behind the human who paid for her. No whip, no threats, no force, just a strange silence. And for the first time in her life, no one shouted at her to move faster. She stepped inside the ship's ramp. Blinking at the cool air and dim lights, the door hissed shut behind her, cutting off the sound of the auction forever. She stood there, shaking, unsure what came next. The human walked to the controls, powered up the engines, and said quietly, "You're safe now." She didn't believe him. Not yet, but something inside her, a small thing, almost dead, moved again. Hope, just a flicker. But it was more than she'd had in years, and as the ship lifted off the cruel desert floor, the feline girl sat down near the wall, hugging her knees for the first time. No chains pulled her back. She didn't know what he wanted from her. She didn't know why he chose her, but she knew one thing: this human was different, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't trash after all. The hum of the ship filled the silence, soft and low like a gentle breath. The feline girl sat on the cold floor of the cargo bay. Her knees hugged tight to her chest. She hadn't spoken since the door closed behind her. The human didn't chain her, didn't shout, didn't even look back. He was just quiet. She didn't understand it. Every other owner made their commands clear, made their punishment clearer. But this human, just left her alone. He walked past her once, then came back with a soft folded blanket. He set it down beside her without a word, then placed a small bottle of water and a protein bar next to it. Then he left again, disappearing into another room. She stared at the food, not moving, her hands shaking. Was it poisoned? A trick? Would he punish her for touching it without permission? Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, her hunger won. She grabbed the bar, tore it open with her teeth, and ate like a starved animal. She didn't notice the human quietly watching her from the hallway. He said nothing, just stood there, a soft sadness in his eyes. When she was done, she licked the crumbs off her fingers and curled into the blanket like a shivering cat. She slept with one eye half open, her tail wrapped tightly around her legs. That night, she heard a voice, not yelling, not cruel, a quiet voice from the control room. She crept close and peeked from the corner. Staying in the shadows, the human was sitting at the console, talking to a small photo frame. The picture was old, cracked at the edges, showing a smiling girl with curly hair. He spoke softly. "You'd like her, Myra? She's quiet, scared. Reminds me of when you were little." The feline girl blinked, confused. Was he talking to the girl in the photo? His voice trembled. "They said she was useless, rejected, same words they used for you. But I couldn't let them do it again." Not to her. The feline girl's breath caught in her throat. He was talking about her. She backed away slowly, returned to her corner, and wrapped the blanket tighter. Something heavy pressed against her chest. Guilt, confusion, fear, and something else she didn't recognize. Warmth, maybe. The next day, he brought her a soft shirt and clean pants. "Your size, I think," he said gently. Placing them nearby, she looked at him, but said nothing. Still waiting for the moment he'd change, still waiting for pain, for commands, for control, but he only said, "The shower's through that door if you want it," and left her alone again. She waited 30 minutes, then finally stood up and walked toward the door. The shower was small, but warm. She cried silently as the water ran over her. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. When she stepped out, dressed in clean clothes, she found a small tray of food left on the table. Roasted vegetables, soft bread. Something that smelled like cheese. She sat on the floor to eat. Even though a chair was right there, the human walked in quietly and sat across from her. Not saying a word, after a long silence, he finally asked, "What's your name?" She looked down, ashamed. "I don't have one." He nodded slowly. "Do you want one?" She didn't answer, just kept eating. Later that night, she heard him again, talking to the photo. "Mira." She still won't speak much, but she took a shower. "She didn't flinch when I got close today. Maybe she'll be okay." The feline girl laid on her side, facing the wall, eyes wide open. The words echoed in her ears. She'll be okay. No one had ever said that about her before. She had been called many things: broken, dirty, failure, tool, but never okay. She wanted to ask who Mira was, but the words stuck in her throat, so she said nothing. The days passed slowly, but gently. He never touched her without reason. Never yelled, never gave her orders. He just spoke to her like she was. Rio, one morning, she entered the control room quietly and stood behind him. He turned, surprised but calm. She opened her mouth, voice dry. "Why did you buy me?" She whispered. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. He looked at her carefully, then said, "Because I saw someone worth saving." Her lips trembled. No one had ever said that. She blinked fast, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway. Big, quiet tears that fell onto her hands. He didn't come close, didn't try to hug her, didn't say anything more. He just let her cry. And that was enough, that night, for the first time. She slept on the bed he gave her, not on the floor, and she slept without fear. The human ship floated through silent space, far from the noise of planets, away from cruel voices and cold hands. Inside, the feline girl sat on the edge of her small bed, staring at her own fingers. They were thin, rough, covered with tiny scars she had stopped noticing long ago. She touched one near her wrist, a deep burn mark, older than she could remember. It still stung sometimes, especially when the room got cold. The human had not asked her to work, had not given her a task or demand. But that day, he softly knocked on her door. "We're docking at a station," he said from the hallway. "You need a medical check." She froze, ears low, tail stiff. Medical? She had been to medical rooms before, and they were never kind. Before she could speak, he added, "Just a scan. Nothing will touch you unless you say yes." He didn't force her, didn't even wait. He walked away and left the choice with her. An hour later, she quietly stepped into the cockpit and sat in the second seat. Saying nothing, he smiled but didn't say anything either. The station was small, built into an asteroid, glowing with blue lights and soft energy hums. They entered together, but she walked slightly behind, her eyes watching every movement, every alien face that passed. The medical room was clean, quiet, smelling like soft herbs and sterilized air. A female nurse with 4 arms welcomed them, her voice gentle. The feline girl trembled when the scanner came close, but the human held up his hand. "She needs time," he said. "Explain it to her." The nurse knelt to the feline girl's level and spoke slowly. "This machine will only scan from outside. No needles, no pain, just light, still scared." The feline girl nodded once, very slowly. She sat on the exam bed, her tail curling tight around her legs. The scan began, light passing over her skin, her bones, her broken memories. The screen behind the nurse filled with red marks, fractures, burns, damaged nerves, past surgeries done wrong. The nurse frowned, whispering, "Oh stars." This poor girl. The feline girl looked down. Ashamed, she expected the human to be angry, to say she was useless now. Instead, he came closer and said softly, "You've been through more than most warriors." Her throat closed, her eyes burned. The nurse sighed. "There are ways to help her." She listed treatments: bone knitters, nerve soothers, scar removers. But the feline girl shook her head, her voice dry. "Too expensive," the human replied. "I didn't ask for the price." She looked at him in shock. "Why? Why would you waste money on me?" He kneeled in front of her and said, "Because you're not a waste." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't know how to respond to kindness that asked for nothing. They began the treatment, slowly. First her broken fingers, then her twisted ankle. No pain, just gentle warmth and quiet machines. She didn't cry when they touched the scar under her collarbone, but her hands shook badly. The nurse paused. This one was a brand. The feline girl nodded once, not wanting to remember. She thought the human would look away in disgust, but he only said, "We'll erase it later." They walked back to the ship, silent again. But something was different. Her steps were steadier, her back a little straighter. In the cargo room, she sat on the bench and stared at her hands again. They didn't hurt anymore, but deep inside, something still did. That night, she walked into the control room again. Quietly as always, the human sat in his chair, reading an old datapad. She stood behind him for a long time before whispering, "I'm not used to this." He turned slightly. "To what?" "To someone. Caring." He didn't answer right away, then said, "Neither was I." She blinked. Surprised? What do you mean? He looked at the photo of the girl again. My daughter died. Years ago, I left everything behind after that, he added. Until I saw you. The feline girl sat beside him slowly. Not close, but not far either. I'm sorry, she whispered. Her voice soft and real. They sat together in silence. Not as owner and slave, not as master and tool. But as two broken people trying to heal. Before going to bed, she turned and said, My ribs still hurt when I breathe too fast. He nodded. We'll fix that next, for the first time. She believed him, and for the first time, she wanted to be whole again. The ship floated quietly through open space. Far from busy trade routes, far from slavers, noise and shame. Inside, the feline girl stood in the training room, bare feet on the smooth floor, her tail low and still. Her breathing was slow, careful, her eyes locked on the mirror in front of her. Her hands trembled as she reached forward. Trying to balance on her own, the pain in her ribs had faded. The deep aches in her legs were dull now, but the fear hadn't gone yet. Behind her, the human watched without speaking. Arms crossed, calm but alert. He didn't push her. Didn't rush her. He only said gently, You can lean on the wall if it's too much. The feline girl shook her head. Jaw clenched. I want to try without it. Her voice was still quiet. But her eyes held something new, something bright. He smiled just a little. All right, we'll go slow. She took one step forward. Shaky, almost falling, but she caught herself. Another step, and then another, until her knees buckled and she dropped down with a soft grunt. The human moved fast, but didn't touch her, just crouched nearby. She looked at him, ears low. I fell. You stood, he replied. You walked further than yesterday. She looked away. Blinking fast, it still hurts. He nodded. Healing always does. The next day, she returned to the training room again. And the next, day by day. Her body remembered how to move without pain, how to trust the floor under her feet. She no longer curled up in the corner at night. She used the bed. Laid out flat like she wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. One evening, she asked softly, Do I look better now? The human looked up from his tools, studying her for a moment. She wore a clean gray shirt and soft pants. Her fur brushed, her hair tied behind her ears. You look strong, he said, and you look like you. She blinked. I don't know who that is. You will, he replied, and went back to tightening a bolt. The ship needed repairs now and then. And she started watching him work. He explained things without asking her to help, how the wires powered the gravity, how the filters cleaned the air. One day, without a word, she picked up a small tool and passed it to him. He took it and nodded, not saying anything. But something warm passed between them. Later that night, she stood in front of the mirror in her room, staring at her reflection. She still saw the scars, but they were fading. She still saw the girl who had been sold like meat, but now she stood straighter. She raised her hand slowly, touched the mirror's surface, and whispered, Who are you? The mirror didn't answer, but something in her chest stirred. Maybe she wasn't trash anymore. Maybe she could become someone. The human began teaching her how to read trade language, how to speak more clearly. She practiced with shaky words, short sentences. And sometimes she laughed softly when she messed up. It was the first time he had ever heard her laugh. He didn't say anything, but his eyes shone. One evening, he brought her to the observation deck, where stars stretched like rivers across the glass. She stood there in silence, staring out into the galaxy she never thought she'd see freely. I never imagined I'd be out here, she said. Her voice almost a whisper. You belong here, he replied. More than most I've met. She turned to him. Serious now? Why do you care? He didn't answer right away, then said quietly, Because when I saw you on that auction block, I saw someone the world had broken. I know what that feels like, he added. I know how hard it is to climb out of it. She didn't respond. Not with words, but she stepped closer to the window and stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. That night, in her room, she wrote something on a piece of scrap metal using a dull tool. One word, scratched and shaky, but full of meaning. Try. She taped it on the wall, right above her bed, the next morning. She stood in the training room again, this time with a soft weighted vest across her chest. I'm ready, she told him. Her golden eyes steady, he nodded. Let's go further today, and she did. Step by step, breath by breath, without falling. She didn't know where the road would end, but for the first time in her life, she had started walking it on her own, and the human. He didn't lead, he didn't follow. He just walked beside her, quietly, always there. The ship was calm that morning, filled with soft hums and the gentle scent of warm tea. The feline girl sat by the front window, her tail slowly swaying, eyes fixed on the stars. Her body no longer ached like before. Her steps no longer trembled. She had learned how to read a bit, tighten wires, and even laugh once in a while. But peace never lasted. Not for someone like her, not in this galaxy. The warning alarm rang without mercy, a red light flashing above the cockpit door. She jumped to her feet, heart pounding. The human rushed in. Checking the controls, voice calm but firm. We're being followed, he said. His eyes scanning the data, small warship. Tagged as private property enforcement, her blood ran cold. She knew that name, that ship, that symbol. A black fang over a red moon, the mark of the slavers who once owned her. Her hands shook, her legs locked in place. No, 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 she whispered. They're not supposed to find me, not again. He turned to her. You're not theirs anymore, but she backed away. Panic rising fast, you don't understand. They don't care about laws, they'll take me back. They'll brand me again or kill me for running. His voice grew firm. No one is taking you outside the ship. The war vessel opened comes. A cold voice filled the air. Human vessel 92 Delta. You are harboring stolen property. The feline girl's ears folded low. Her breathing sharp and uneven. Return the slave unit now. Or be fired upon, the voice ordered. The human didn't flinch. Didn't even touch the comes button yet. He looked at her instead. What do you want to do? Her eyes widened. What? I said, he repeated. This is your choice, not mine. She couldn't believe it. Not after all these years. Her mind screamed to hide, to surrender, to crawl back into chains just to avoid pain, but her hands curled into fists. And she whispered, no. He smiled softly, then finally pressed the comes button. This girl is under my protection, he said. Voice steady. She's not property. She's a person and you're not laying a finger on her. The warship gave no warning shot. It opened fire. The blast rocked the ship. Panels sparked. Lights flickered. The feline girl screamed as metal tore through the side of the hallway. The human grabbed her arm, pulling her down a narrow corridor. Get to the med bay. Lock the door. What about you? She shouted, voice breaking. I have to hold the bridge, he said. Trust me. She hesitated for 1 second, then ran. The ship shuddered again as another hit slammed against the hull. The feline girl sealed the medbay door and fell to her knees, shaking, heart crashing against her ribs. She watched through a small screen as the human moved through smoke and sparks. Fighting fire, keeping systems online. She saw a beam hit his shoulder. He stumbled, blood soaking through his sleeve. No. She cried, hitting the door panel, trying to unlock it. Her mind screamed to stay hidden, to obey, to survive quietly, like always. But her heart said something else. Not this time. She stormed out of the medbay and ran toward the engine room. Breathing hard, She remembered the controls. The buttons he showed her, the power couplings. Her fingers flew across them, rerouting power to the shields. Cutting engines, starting an emergency spin. The ship twisted sharply, the enemy shots missing by inches. The slavers weren't ready for that. The human looked up at the screen, stunned. She did that. The feline girl's voice came over the comms. Shaky but strong. Tell me what to do next. He guided her from the bridge. His voice calm even through pain. Together. They forced the ship into a tight maneuver and disappeared into a debris field. The warship chased for a while, but soon gave up. They vanished into the silence. Limping, but alive, hours later, she sat beside him in the med bay. Wrapping his shoulder, tears still wet on her face. You were supposed to stay safe, he whispered. Weak but smiling, she looked him in the eye. Her voice shaking, you fought for me. I couldn't just watch, he reached up. Gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, you're not broken, he said. You never were. She leaned her head against his chest, heart pounding for the first time. She didn't feel like property, or trash, or a burden. She felt something else, like she belonged. Asterisk the ship floated quietly now, hidden deep inside a cold asteroid field. The hull was scarred, the engines damaged. The lights flickering dimly. But inside there was warmth, in the med bay. The feline girl sat beside the human, gently wrapping clean bandages around his shoulder. His skin was bruised and bleeding, but his face was calm. I told you to stay safe, he whispered, a weak smile on his lips. She looked down, ears drooping. I couldn't let them take you. His eyes softened. You saved the ship. I remembered what you taught me, she said, voice shaking. All those times you thought I wasn't listening. Silence filled the room for a moment, thick and heavy. Then he reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers. Thank you, he said quietly. You didn't just save me, you saved yourself. She didn't know how to respond. So she stayed there, fingers resting on his, breathing together in the stillness. That night, while he rested, she walked alone through the ship. Smoke still lingered in some corners. Wires dangled from the ceiling. But she wasn't scared. Not anymore. She was angry. Not at the human, not at herself. She was angry at the world that called her property, that burned her skin, that threw her away. She stood in the hallway, fists clenched, staring at the broken control panel. Then she turned and walked toward the cargo bay. She opened a storage crate and found something wrapped in cloth. Something the human had once used when he worked on outer repairs. An old plasma torch. She stared at it for a long time. Then took it in both hands and walked to the mirror in her room. Her reflection looked back at her, worn, scarred, but alive, very slowly. She lifted the torch and cut through the last thing that bound her. The old metal collar still hidden under her shirt. Locked to her neck, it clattered to the floor with a heavy sound. She stared at it, breathing hard, then kicked it into the wall. She didn't need it anymore. She wasn't theirs. She was herself the next morning. The human woke up to the smell of food, real food, warm and simple. He turned his head and saw her in the kitchen corner, frying vegetables in a small pan. Tail swaying slowly. You're cooking? He asked, smiling weakly. She looked over her shoulder. A small, proud smile on her lips. Trying, he chuckled softly. Smells better than most station food. She brought the tray over and sat beside him. Offering a spoon, he took a bite, blinked in surprise. This is good, she beamed. Just a little. Her golden eyes glowing in the soft light. They ate together in silence. The kind of silence that felt full, not empty. Later, while cleaning up, she found the datapad he kept under his seat. It had a map of possible safe worlds. Planets outside slaver reach, colonies that welcomed refugees. She tapped the screen carefully. Studying the names, when he noticed her, she looked at him and said, "Let's go to one." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" She nodded. "I don't want to run anymore. I want to live somewhere that doesn't hurt." He reached over and tapped the nearest world, Narella 7. A green moon with oceans and forests. "It's a long trip," he said. "We'll need repairs first." "I'll help," she replied, without hesitation. "I'm not just cargo anymore." The next few days passed quietly, but they worked hard together. She helped patch the wiring, held tools steady, even climbed into vents without fear. At night, they talked, not about the past, but about things they might grow or build on a new world. She spoke about a small house with soft lights. Maybe a garden, maybe even a cat. He smiled. A cat for a feline girl. She grinned. "I'd take good care of it." But just as the ship was ready to leave the field, a signal came through the emergency channel, a call for help. Another slave ship had crashed on a nearby rock. Its beacon weak and dying, the human hesitated, reading the data. "It's a trap," he whispered. "Or worse, it's someone like you." She looked at him with calm eyes. Her voice steady. "Then let's find out." He stared at her for a moment, then nodded. They changed course together, flying through the dark, not as master and slave, not as rescuer and rescued, but as partners. As they neared the broken signal, the feline girl leaned closer to the window, her voice soft. "If there's someone down there like me," she said, "I want to be the one who reaches out first." He looked at her with pride in his eyes. "You're not just surviving anymore," he said. "You're becoming something bigger." She nodded. Heart steady, eyes full of light. Fire had once tried to destroy her, but now it burned in her chest, strong, bright, free. The sky of Narella 7 was the softest shade of blue she had ever seen. It stretched wide over forests of silver-leaf trees and quiet lakes that sparkled like glass. The air was warm and sweet, filled with scents of earth and wind. She stepped off the ship slowly, her bare feet pressing into soft soil. No chains held her back. No collars clung to her neck. She was free, truly free. Beside her, the human stood quietly. His wounded shoulders still wrapped, but healing. They had landed on a peaceful farm near a refugee outpost, a place that welcomed the lost, the broken, and the brave. The officials didn't ask many questions, just stamped the documents, gave them a plot of land, and nodded with soft smiles. But there was one box she hadn't filled yet. Name. She stared at the empty space on the form, her fingers twitching over the screen for so long. She had been it, slave, breeder, or worse. Even he had only called her you or kid or girl, waiting for her to choose for herself. Now the time had come. That night she sat outside their small cabin under the stars. Staring at the form glowing in her lap, the human sat beside her, sipping warm broth, silent and patient. She didn't look at him, but her voice was steady. "I don't want a name that reminds me of them." "You shouldn't," he replied. "Choose something that feels like you." She closed her eyes. Listening to the wind, it whispered softly through the trees, brushing her ears, and suddenly she remembered something. A word she'd heard once, long ago, from a trader woman who gave her water when no one else would. The woman had called her hope. Back then, it made no sense, but now? It did. She looked at the human, her golden eyes glowing in the dark. "Can I take that word?" "Which one?" He asked gently. "Hope," she whispered. "Is that allowed?" He smiled, wide and true. "It's more than allowed." She tapped the screen with one finger, slowly typing each letter, HOP, her name, chosen by her, not given by anyone else, when the form accepted it. A soft chime rang from the tablet. "Welcome, Citizen Hope," it said. In a calm, robotic voice, she laughed softly. Wiping tears from her eyes, the human chuckled. "Sounds official now," She looked at him, more serious. Do you have a name too? He paused, then nodded. Elias? She repeated it, slowly, tasting the sound. Elias? He nodded again. Not many people say it anymore. Feels nice to hear it. Hope smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes. They sat there in silence. Under stars older than both of them the next day. They planted seeds near their cabin. Cleared rocks, built a fence. Hope learned how to carry tools. Used machines, talked to other settlers. Some still looked at her with surprise when they saw her feline features. But no one insulted her. She was just Hope Quiet. Strong, helpful, free. One morning, a visitor arrived at their gate. A young alien girl with wide eyes and bruises on her arms. Hope saw her and stopped breathing for a second. The girl looked like she had once looked scared. Dirty, waiting to be hurt. Elias opened the gate, but said nothing. He waited for Hope. Hope walked forward, slowly, gently, and knelt before the girl. What's your name? She asked softly. The girl whispered, I don't know. Hope held out her hand. Then let's find one together. The girl stared at her, then took her hand, trembling but willing. That night, Hope sat on the porch, the girl sleeping inside on a soft blanket. Elias sat beside her again, same warm cup in hand. You did what I did for you, he said. Voice quiet, she nodded. It was my turn. He looked at her. Pride shining in his tired eyes, you know? You never needed anyone to save you. She turned to him. Then why did you? Because I wanted to, he replied. And because I believed you would become something beautiful. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Closing her eyes, I think I finally did, she whispered. Far from slave ships, far from pain. Far from the name they tried to force on her, she had found her voice. Her place, her purpose, her name was Hope. And she would never be silent again.